Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Today, I am really excited because we have Alex Marlow here. He is the editor-in-chief of Breitbart News. And for those of you who don't know my background, I started in this world, in the media world, with Real America's Voice. And one of my go-to sources was always Breitbart because they are cutting edge. They always have the inside scoop, and they are a great organization. But they don't get enough play because Google did this horrible thing where they took them off. And honestly, I think it's relevant right now because we're talking about debanking, and the president has been talking about debanking, but it's more than just debanking. What happened to Breitbart? I think that they were a major source for such a long time, and then the leftists tried to hide them. So for all of you who are looking for the real news, it's Breitbart, and Alex Marlow is the editor-in-chief. He is also the host of the Alex Marlow Show podcast, and he has a new book out called Breaking the Law, Exposing the Weaponization of America's Legal System Against Donald Trump. Alex, thank you so much for joining me.
Tudor, it's such a nice introduction. Thank you for having me on the show. And I'll tell you, the Google stuff is so important. We really were the canaries in the coal mine for cancel culture. They tried to destroy us with all sorts of smears, particularly that we were anti-Semitic, even though the company was founded by Jews, and the idea for it came from Israel, and we're 100% pro-Israel. And it's just sort of, especially in this moment, but they would come up with anything, try to smear us. And then right before the 2020 election, Google completely took us off. So you can't get Breitbart in Google searches unless you use the word Breitbart. That was the little technicality they used. So we didn't sue them into the ground, which I don't know. Could you sue Google in the ground? They're pretty big.
Right, exactly. That's the problem. They have so much money.
Yeah. So, this is a real positive that could happen with the AI era, which is maybe people are not as hooked on using Google searches, which is very bad for the conservative movement because they cook the results to favor left-wing causes and to try to destroy conservative businesses too, which is important.
And Breitbart, my experience with Breitbart is that there is an expert in almost every area. So it's a massive amount of writers that are out there every day doing real journalism. And I think that's important to say because I think a lot of these blogs have turned into news sites, but they're not, because they're not true journalism. You have to question some of the things that you're getting. That is not the case with Breitbart. I've always been so impressed with everything you guys do. And I want to make sure people know that that's a go-to.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple of responses to that. First of all, my starting lineup is as good as any starting lineup in media. I can guarantee you that if I took my best world reporter, my best economics reporter, my best political reporter, I would kick the Wall Street Journal's butt. It's not even close. They have more resources, so they have more depth than I have. I don't have as many people, so I can't cover quite as much ground. But we cover a lot of essential stuff. And I think because of that, we're actually the best at curation. I think if you go to Breitbart, you're not going to see any fat. There's no fat. I've worked on that over many years. I've been editor-in-chief for 11 years. And so nothing there is going to be boring or bad. And everything, if you're a talk show host, the whole goal, because I grew up on talk radio, that was my entree into conservative news. I want it so that I could, because I watched Andrew Breitbart do this in real time. I want to be able to send a story to the biggest host in the world. At the time was Rush Limbaugh. You're on the Clay and Buck network. I want Clay and Buck and you to be able to take the story and just to read it on air to a vast audience and not have to think twice about it. Because when they see that orange B at the top, they know this thing is legit and they don't have to double check it. And you can't do that with your sources on X, the Everything app, which I enjoy Twitter as much as anyone, but it's in the influencer culture we're in, people are trying to get out there first, even if it's not accurate, and they're being a little sensational if that gets more clicks. I can't do that. I'm running a big news company, and we are 100% focused on accuracy first, and that's why hopefully we've earned your trust.
Yeah, and that actually, it's one of those things where I see something and I go to your site to see if I can verify it. Like yesterday, there was this, and this will air on Monday, but last week, so there was this, I guess it was a protest in Virginia, and I'm sure you saw the woman who held up the sign.
Sure. That
said the horrible thing about if trans people can't use your bathroom, and then she said to Winsome Sears, then black people can't use my water fountain.
Right? Yeah.
And people were horrified, but honestly, I saw it and I was like, I don't know if this is true. Like, how could it be true? How could the left have gone to that level? Yeah, it's shocking.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things where you can rely on us to kind of get to the bottom of those types of stories on your behalf, because I'm not going to put up anything that is, especially in the AI era, I just have so many reps because we do 100 plus stories a day. We've been doing it for, I don't know, 16, 17 years since we relaunched Breitbart. And so it's one of these things where we're accustomed to doing the first thing is, if this is too good to be true, it probably is. So let's work it through. And if you're trying to, dominate on the X platform, you can't do that. You gotta double check it. But one thing that is notable, though, is that we assume the left will do any of that. I mean, they tried to kill President Trump a couple times last year, and there was all these people championing it online. Just the amount of people who call for assassinations of President Trump online is just amazing. And it is a normative view. I mean, the most obvious news cycle that's a corollary is the Sydney Sweeney one recently, where there are people in the top of the left-wing commentariat who are saying this is a right-wing hoax, that they didn't say that this was racist and Nazis. And then you go to TikTok and every other post was, oh, this is a Nazi ad. And it's like, you guys can't fool us with that anymore. We know how you operate. You've no control, you've no governor, you've no censors. So that's why people see signs like that. And immediately the presumption is it's legit. Maybe it's not every once in a while, but for the most part, that stuff is real. That's what the left does.
But I wondered when that American Eagle ad came out, because we shop there. I have 4 girls. They're all at that age where that's the store to go to. And it had been dropping off in sales. So they did this as a way to kind of build back their sales. And then they got hit with this backlash. And I thought, I hope this doesn't kill another business, because it is really hard to find clothes for kids because you don't have that many stores you can actually go to, and kids are all awkward sizes. They've got to try things on. So we went to the mall last weekend, and the American Eagle was shoulder to shoulder with people.
Wow.
Which I thought was a great commentary on how people are not believing this baloney anymore.
This is such an interesting topic and has nothing to do with anything I've been reporting on, but it's just a part of my life because I've got 4 young kids, is that you want to, I'm pro boycott because I think it's good for the soul. I don't know if it always hurts businesses, but I think that sometimes I don't feel good buying Nike because of the stuff they've done over the years, so I'm not going to. And I don't think I'm going to be able to destroy Nike single-handedly, even with my platform at Breitbart. I can't, even announcing to my audience I'm not buying Nike. I don't know if I can destroy them. But I will tell you, I don't feel good with their products, so I don't. But if you think about some of these material retailers, if you want to boycott Walmart because you don't like their predatory business practices, then you go to Amazon with world's richest man who owns the Washington Post, which just puts out nonstop assaults on our republic. And so you don't want to do that. So, okay, so I'll go to Target, but Target was the original, let's have the guys in the girls' bathroom people. So you want to do that. And then we're going to shop. And then it becomes very, very challenging to do that. Disney is so repulsive in so many ways, but the stuff on Netflix is worse than the stuff on Disney. It just is. It's just worse. And so it's like, if I'm boycotting Disney, then that means, what am I supposed to use? Netflix, where the corporate board donates 99 to 1% to Democrats, and then they put out even worse content for kids. So it's really, really hard. And we all got to work together, Tudor. This is the point. We got to work as a conservative movement. We got to sort this stuff out together.
And that's why I think it's so important to have these platforms where we can talk. And I am grateful to Clay and Buck that they give me this platform. And that's why I do want to get into what happened to Donald Trump, because it was something that we really weren't allowed to talk about during the campaign. Obviously, we all did. But the left was like, hey, you can't say that Donald Trump is being targeted. He's a bad guy. And we're all watching this, especially business people, and saying what happened in New York is unreasonable. It's unconstitutional. How can there be a victimless crime that is created by the attorney general or the district attorney, and then you owe $500 million?
Yeah, the Tish James case is, I'm happy this is getting a lot of scrutiny, because what I write about in Breaking the Law is I frame this up as we're starting an investigation season. It's a more upbeat book than some of my past books. I would say in a way it's my most upbeat, even though some of it's very dark and very scary. And there's a big warning and a call to action for people that I think the left-wing lawfare superstructure is the single biggest threat to MAGA, and we can talk about that. But I'll tell you, with this particular administration, I feel confidence that we're going to see some investigations, and maybe people won't get fully held to account the way that they deserve. I'm way too cynical to promise that to the audience. But I will tell you that there are some really obvious, glaring violations of the law that are going to be pressed by this administration. And I put the book out on, I guess it was about 3 weeks ago. And 3 days later, they announced that they were investigating Tish James, which was the number one person that I called for an investigation into. And I call for 6 to 10 investigations in the book, but she's the number one because what she did was it was so blatantly a violation of due process rights and equal justice under the law, the Fifth and Sixth Amendment. And then when we're talking about the what happened the other day, where the penalty against Donald Trump was thrown out, it was thrown out for the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment, which of course it was. Donald Trump had, according to James and Judge Arthur Engeron, defrauded these banks, but these banks loved dealing with Trump. They loved dealing with him. Trump didn't owe them a penny. They didn't launch one complaint about him, but she had claimed that he'd undervalued his properties and thus he had committed a violation that needed over $300 million in penalty plus interest, which amounted to over $500 million in the end. All of this was clearly cruel and unusual. We've never seen anything done like this to a president. We've never seen this done to really any individual at all. She's supposed to be representing the state of New York, but she ends up kind of forcing these banks into participating into this. And the banks kind of like Trump, and some of them really like Trump. And all of it was designed to be a political persecution. And so she's the number one person who should be investigated. And clearly that penalty should have been vacated. And I'm glad it was.
But I think it is even deeper than Donald Trump. I mean, that penalty also included his sons. It meant he couldn't be involved in business. It meant they couldn't be involved in business in New York. I mean, it was wide-ranging how damaging it was to the Trump family.
You're very astute to point this out because this was the case where they tried to bar all sorts of different Trumps from being able to apply their craft, be able to practice real estate in New York, a city where they're iconic. We're the most famous family in the city of the most famous city in the country. And they were trying to ban Donald and Eric from being able to practice for 5 years. Initially, James had eyes on Ivanka and people who were not even like really in this sort of game, the real estate game. And that's how punitive they were trying to be simply for the crime of being the Trumps.
This was, I think this was very eye-opening for even people on the left because it was the penalty was so big. I think the penalty was so big because they thought, well, if you make it this big, then the people have to get behind it because how could you possibly get a penalty this big if the person weren't very, very corrupt and if the person weren't a criminal? However, I think that backfired on them because people went, there's no victim and now he has to pay $500 million. This is the former president of the United States. And everybody was saying this wouldn't have happened if he weren't running again. Wait a minute. This is stuff we see in other countries, not in the United States.
That's right. Yeah, I make this point. This is stuff that you would see in Brazil, Venezuela. It's not something we're accustomed to seeing in the United States. And we were way too casual about it, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to write the book, is that Trump had to go through 6 of these cases simultaneously, all of which would have, I don't know, I'm a pretty tough guy. I think I would have been in the fetal position on one of these things, and he had 6 of them. And he somehow ran for president and won during all this, which is colossally unjust. And we just can't take it for granted that we happen to have a guy at the top who has a lot of rhinoceros skin and has just a huge force of will. And let's be frank, is incredibly rich. And that was a huge advantage here. Tish James was holding on, or I'm sure she is. She's going to have to give it back momentarily. $5 million of his money that he had to put up on bond. I mean, he should get paid interest on that, to be frank, because it was an illegitimate penalty. He still to put up $175 million. Even for billionaires, I don't know a lot of them, Tudor, but I know enough to know that not all of them are liquid enough where they can just find $175 million lying around, even if they're on paper, they're extremely wealthy. It's a lot of money. He had to put this up in the middle of a campaign. He's trying to win a campaign. We've never seen anything like this in America. It's a disgrace. And if people's heads don't roll, if there aren't consequences, they're going to do it again. And you also point something out that's so big. It's not just Trump. Trump's the main guy, but I go through dozens of other people who have been wrapped up in this. It's just not as headline grabbing because they're not running for president and are the president.
But other people that are running have to worry about this. And I say that from personal experience because I ran for governor, and then you come out of that race and we had legal battles with the state and we had threats from the state. And I was like, oh my gosh, here I am not running and we're going to be targeted by these lunatics here. And that comes into play when you think about running again. Look, my kids are going into their last 6 years of school. I don't want to go to prison. I don't want to be accused of some crime I didn't commit. I want to be there for them. How insane is it to think that running for office, and I'm not rich, I'm not in that situation. So I'm like, gosh, they could just disappear me into a prison somewhere. And that's honestly a consideration now when you run for office.
You're right to point this out, because this is one of the things that I think is the biggest threat, is that we're constructing a system so that normal human beings are not going to seek the highest office in the land. You'll have to be a very strange person. And I mean, to want to be president, obviously you have to have a massive ego to think that you should be president. But we would like to have people that have some sense of shame or humility to be able to run. And we can't. This is a whole thing. I talk about this a little bit, just as a brief aside in the book, about how the obsession with Trump's tax returns. Like, what do they want them for? I mean, what are they trying to do? Like, to prove he's not a good businessman, or he's not charitable enough? Like, what? And then they finally got some of them, and Rachel Maddow played it up, and they were perfectly fine. He paid a huge amount in taxes, and there was nothing wrong with any of them. They just want to have a public colonoscopy to harass people, so that normal people who have a sense of dignity, who don't want their name dragged through the mud, aren't going to enter civic life. And that's not going to help our country. It's going to hurt our country. But the left doesn't care, because they see this as a way of assuring that they'll have more political power. That's what lawfare is all about. It is making the legal system, the judicial system, a part of their apparatus for constructing power around themselves in a permanent capacity. That's what it is. That's what they're doing. And to understand the mechanics of it is very fundamental to us saving the republic.
So they passed this law in Michigan in, I think it was the end of 22, and it was going into effect in 23. So I ran in 22. They passed it after the election. It went into effect in 23. And that was that if you are an elected official, you have to disclose all of your finances. And if you are running for office, you have to disclose all of your finances, which I think that for someone who is running for office, oftentimes it is someone who has been very successful, because it's extremely expensive. And that to me is a deterrent to have somebody go in, because, why is it anybody's business what you've made over the last year or 2 years, And so they pass this, and then they put it in retroactive. So they go after everybody who's run in the past and say, you have to disclose your finances. And if you don't disclose your finances, then you get fined. And I said to my attorney, how is it possible that they can retroactively force me to put everything out there about and your husband has to as well. So your spouse has to also disclose everything financially. Whitmer had, before this went into effect, moved all of her money into LLCs that no one could see. So her report is like, oh, all this money went into an LLC. You don't have any detail about it. And I'm like, this is it's so stupid, because you pass these laws just to pass a law, and then the actual elected officials, they know how the law works, so they manipulate everything, so it doesn't matter anyway. But anybody who comes into it unknowing, they're like sitting there with their pants down.
I just asked the audience to do this test on yourself. It's like, for me, I've never missed a tax payment. I pay 6 figures in taxes. I'm a good American. I've never been arrested for anything. I don't want to have a public colonoscopy for my finances for the public if I ran for office. That's just the sort of thing where, with my personality, I don't want that. My wife is a private person. She practices medicine, curing cancer of the people in the community. I don't want her to have to go through all that stuff because her husband might want to get into politics one day. That doesn't make any sense to me. That does not make America better. Does that make America better? Or is this a tool of the left trying to get some of our best and brightest people out of the political space? That's obviously what it is. And that's what everything that they did to Donald Trump wasn't just about Trump. And his quote, which I refer to millions of times in the book, and not millions, but several times in the book, they're not coming after me, they're coming after you, I'm just in the way. That is the one time when you've got to take Trump literally. He's being dead serious about this.
Yes.
They're trying to get the bench, people like you who are warming up in the bullpen, who are ready to go, to say, you know what, never mind, I'm going to go make some money and hang out with my kids, and I'm going to enjoy America, and I'm not going to get involved. That's not going to help us. And that's their whole plan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a state in Michigan. You can't FOIA the governor. You can't FOIA the legislature. But if you run for office, they can look through everything you've ever done in your life. It's shocking. So once you're in office, you're totally protected. Nobody can see anything. And I even talked to a Republican and I said, while you guys are in control, pass a bill to say you want to have the legislature to have FOIA and have the governor be subject to FOIA.
Unbelievable.
And they said, this person said to me, well, we don't want to do that. It'll just complicate things. And we have to have a second email. And I'm like, it doesn't even strike you that the public should know what you're doing. You're like, I'll just game it.
See, isn't this something? They need to know everything about you before you took office, even private stuff. But then once you're in office, then they can be secretive. I mean, it just shows you that we have such systemic rot. And that's why we got to start dealing with it. We can't let people get away with everything. We can't have 2 tiers of justice. I argue there's 3 tiers of justice now. That and I think your point illustrates this, your last anecdote. Because it's not just that there's a system of justice for some people, there's the system of justice for President Trump, where just by breathing the air, you get a $500 million penalty, $500 million penalty. But then there's this third tier, this Comey, Brennan, Clapper tier, where you get CNN contributorships and you get book deals because you've evaded the law, and I believe we'll find out broke the law eventually. And that's not okay either. So we've really got to start making hay while the sun's shining here. And it feels like with the team in place, with Cash and Dan and with Ed Martin, it feels like we might be able to start getting some results here.
That is what I think has been so shocking, is when the book came out about Joe Biden and what's his name, Tapper was out there saying, oh, look at what I've done. I've exposed all of this. And I was horrified because I'm like, you guys, Jake Tapper saw it the whole time. He was covering for it. He even admits that in the debate, he was like, oh, crap, like we're busted. And I don't believe for a minute that was the first time he noticed Joe was low. He knew the entire time. They all knew the entire time. Now you've got the guy who said, I testified that he was okay, but I only met him twice in person and twice on the phone. I mean, this is shocking stuff.
So I think you and I might be on a similar page here, which I feel like no one's with me on this, but maybe you are. I think there was no cover-up. I don't think it was the greatest cover-up of all time. I think there's zero cover-up. We all knew Biden was in deep mental decline. We all knew that his doctors had been lying about his mental conditions. My previous book, Breaking Biden, was a deep dive into the Biden family and their corruption. It was a New York Times bestseller. It was the stuff was not secret. I spent a lot of time researching this family. We all knew he was in steady decline. This was the media trying to cover their own asses because they had signed up that, yeah, we're going to roll with Biden. And then they realized it wasn't going to work and they were going to lose badly. And they were just trying to cover for themselves because they're part of the Democrat apparatus that gets Democrats elected, the establishment media, the Jake Tappers of the world. And they'd come up with some way to scapegoat a bunch of people who are irrelevant. There's not one person who's called out in that book, and I read the book, who is going to be relevant going forward. It's all personal airing of grievances about people who are out of power, part of Biden world, and will never return to power. So it's very convenient to note that.
So they did this, and I believe that they felt they could get away with it because they've always been kind of a group management company when they've gone in. It's been like, we have this core team. There's a president and he gets to call the shots to a certain point, but it is groupthink. It is not the way that one guy goes. I think Obama had a lot of control, but I still think there were a lot of people around him that were like, he's a junior senator. We can make this guy do whatever we want.
Yes.
And they didn't think they'd ever get busted.
No, they didn't. And yeah, the whole Politburo model that they had, where they had this core team of advisors, and some of which were unknown. There's even one name apparently in the inner circle that I didn't even know and I spent a year and a half researching this guy. So I knew all the others. So I think I had a good sense of what was going on. But these people making decisions, plus the auto pen stuff, obviously we got to start investigating all this because not all of it's legal. And if we spend time on it, we'll learn some of it was illegal. And hopefully people get held to account. But it is pretty wild that the public thinks they're electing one really odd old person. And then it ends up you get this team of fools who are running our country without any accountability. And then the media covers up for it for the whole time until it's really convenient for them to stop covering up for it. It's just such a disgrace. And that's why we need to repeal and replace the media.
I mean, and even when you look at the team that was in there and you had Jen Psaki with her weird intern that they were doing all the social media, like I mean, when you look back at that now, you go, can you imagine if Trump did that? People would go crazy.
Crazy. Yeah. And you don't know who's really calling the shots. And it is a town where a lot of people who are really ambitious, but are not really smart or qualified you can get pretty high in Washington.
So that's what I want to ask what you think going forward, because I've seen this social media craze. I mean, obviously we saw Whitmer doing all the weird, she had the potato and then she had the Dorito that she fed to the woman on the ground and all of these very strange social media things. But I think that I thought that was weird. I really did. I was like, this is totally bizarre and totally inappropriate for anybody who is an executive. If I had done this at my previous company, I would be fired. This is the kind of stuff that you fire employees for. And this is the CEO of the state. Gavin Newsom has gone, in my opinion, totally off the rails. My husband the other night said to me, he said, oh, but that's not really him. That's like just a Twitter account that is like, supportive of him. I said, it is his press office. Like, what are you talking about? This is his official account. What do you think is happening? It's insane.
Yeah, this reminds me of what I tell my newsroom, which is that when the press secretary speaks, when Karine Jean-Pierre speaks, that when we're putting up front page headlines, generally the default should not be Karine Jean-Pierre : when we're phrasing the headline, it's White House : like this is the White House. She's the spokesperson for the White House. That's who she is speaking for. This is the spokespeople for, the governor of Michigan, the governor of California. They've got these weird, that's what it is. And you can't, it's not a joke that you have a press office. The press office is supposed to liaison with the public so that you could theoretically spend your time governing if you're the governor, and you can do stuff and you can meet with people and you can conduct meetings and do the job that is necessary. And these are the people who talk to the press in the meantime while you're working. Now it's just used as a campaign troll operation. And I just hope that the public rejects it. And that one of the things that Trump does, and he obviously is a very aggressive, trolly press team. But first of all, I think some of that is because they don't have a compliant press that will just print all their stuff unless they do what they need to do to get attention. But the other thing is Trump, in the meantime, is operating very efficiently. I've never seen anyone do so much in 7 months. Mm-hmm. And so you get away with that. Gavin Newsom in California is a perfect example because I'm Californian. His record is atrocious. He's done nothing. He hasn't even done the left-wing stuff he's promised. Like, he talks a big game on left-wing stuff, like high-speed rail. Like, he can't even build that. And, water desalination, stuff like that. He can't do any of the things that he's talked about. He wasn't prepared for the fires. He hasn't helped homelessness. He hasn't helped traffic. The LA airport's the worst airport in the world. And then we're supposed to have the World Cup and the Olympics back to back. And how are people going to fly in? The place is a complete disaster. He hasn't fixed one problem in 30 years in public life, but he's got a great press office. They're hilarious at trolling Trump. Come on.
No, that I think is what you're saying is so important for the American people to hear. This may be funny, and there is an opening I hear for late night television. If that's where he wants to go, I welcome him to go there. But this is not how you lead, and your record should be on how you lead. And really, that's why I've known people who are hardcore Republicans, MAGA Republicans, who've said, I don't love what Trump says on social media, but I love what he does, because that's actually more important. The social media part isn't. What you actually do is more important. What he's doing in Washington, D.C., you've got leftists who are just screaming and crying over what he's doing in Washington, D.C., and Democrats on the ground that are like, thank goodness we're safe.
This is an incredibly important point. And then, because remember, not everyone loves Trump's Twitter. We've all sort of accepted Trump's Twitter at this point, which is fine. I've always been okay with it, but I completely understood people who didn't love it. I mean, now I think after they tried to kill him a bunch of times and bankrupt him and bankrupt his family and throw him in jail.
It's different.
And now he can do whatever he wants, as far as I'm concerned. But I totally understood the beginning of his administration, because I was the guy who at Breitbart, we put everything on the line. We were the first major outlet to get behind Trump, and we put everything on the line, and a lot of it had to do with immigration. And I wanted to see the immigration, the border get sealed up, and for us to crack down on the visa overstays and to start resetting America's immigration policy. And that got pushed way to the bottom of the pile. And he had a good run the last year and a half on immigration, but we had to wait 2.5 years before we got any movement whatsoever on immigration. That was wildly frustrating when he's out there tweeting all the time. I understand it. But the bottom line is that he does attempt to govern every day. He does wake up in the morning and try to get stuff done. I don't see any evidence of that from the Gavin Newsoms of the world. And I've been one of his constituents for a very long time. I do not see him getting up in the morning and trying to get stuff done other than get more men on women's podiums in sports.
So but see that, and I've kept you long, but I'll just ended on this. That is what I see from the left, because Barack Obama was all about making sure we had secure borders. But then they saw an opening for a message, not for governance, not for policy. They see openings now for messages. Look, we can say that he's not a humanitarian, that he doesn't take care of people. They actually don't agree with an open border, but they think it's something you can get elected on. It's the same thing with everything that they're doing right now. They agree with keeping communities safe. They can't say that because they think that they can win voters by saying the opposite. They don't have any idea where they're going. They're looking for a winning message. They're not looking for beyond that. It's like the woman who cannot wait to get to her wedding, but doesn't understand that she's going to end up being married.
That is really, really a good point. And I think about this all the time because some of these ideas, Trump throws stuff out there and it feels like a good idea. And then I marinate on the idea and I realize it's actually a fantastic idea, like the DC crackdown on crime. And I was thinking, that sounds good to me. I lived in DC and I was there from 2013 to 2021. And it went from feeling like the center of the world to a place that I was excited to leave, that it was a bummer. It was more crime ridden. Places like where I lived in and then nearby iconic Georgetown with the cobblestone streets and it was just one of the coolest spots on earth. And then it just kind of every other store was out of business or boarded up. And it was just terrible. And he left DC around that time and he must have come back and thought, what is going on here? This is horrible. And he said, I'm going to do something about it because I can. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought it was a great idea. And then the more I thought it was a great idea, the more the left would commit themselves to, no, this is a terrible idea. What? We're going to clean up America's capital. We're going to make it so that tourists can come here and appreciate our monuments and our museums. And it's actually a very beautiful city when it's cleaned up with our architecture. And people are fighting against that. You're just pro shoplifter and pro murderer and pro vandal. What is this posture that the left is just like, yeah, we're for vandalism now because Trump is against it. Right. It's so colossally stupid and they can't stop themselves, Tudor. That's what's so wild. They can't help themselves one time. It's just Lucy with the football. Every time Charlie Brown goes in for that big kick, that's what the modern day Democrat Party at the moment.
Yes. Trump exposed them and they cannot figure out and expose the media. I mean, that was also another genius thing when he was saying fake news. Everybody was like, he's a little aggressive with this, but it was fake. It was fake and he knew it. And you guys have done such a great job of this. I want to get to your book really quick. Tell us where people can find it. It's called Breaking the Law, Exposing the Weaponization of America's Legal System Against Donald Trump. Critical because, like you said, this is him. We know him. He's big. He could fight it. Yes. He was blessed to be able to fight it. We can't.
Well, let me give you 3 reasons why I think the book is a must read, and the reviews are coming in really good. New York Times bestseller, and so thank you if you picked it up. I always appreciate that. Those accolades make it easier to pitch it to people, so thank you. But the first one is you will enjoy reading it. I think it's a fun read. I pride myself in my books, and I think this is my best written one yet, and it's my shortest, so that's an incentive. But the 2 major points for this audience in terms of an activist audience. First of all, this is a primer for investigation season. We were already seeing 2 investigations, one into Jack Smith, one into Letitia James. These things take time. And I go through the 6 cases against Trump methodically, and I think clearly where you'll understand the cases, you'll be able to differentiate them. I know I couldn't fully differentiate them when I took on the book. That was part of why I was incentivized to do it. I know some attorneys out there, maybe you can, but it's tough to do for normal people. And I'm not an attorney, but I consulted with a lot of them. So I think it's a nice way to present the material in a way where you'll understand where these investigations are going. And you'll get to enjoy them a little more when we get good news like what we've got this week. But the other one is a warning, and that if we don't get engaged on a civic level, we've beaten back Hollywood, we're beating the establishment media, but the left has moved on, and they're using the lawfare superstructure to try to destroy MAGA. And there are some clear reforms we need to make. And if you're not in a position where you're elected and are going to be engaging in the reforms, we need to be holding our elected leaders to account, and we need to be highly involved, off-year elections, down ticket races. We've got to be focused on this. us. We've stayed on a wartime footing because they're working. George Soros, Mark Elias, some of these people who are familiar to you and many that are not familiar to you are working right now to try to destroy MAGA using the lawfare superstructure. And I share with you who those are and what we can do to stop them.
Yeah, I cannot agree with you more. We get lazy in the off year, and there is no off year. I always tell people now, there's no off year. Stop saying that. Exactly, that is not a thing.
Exactly right. And I've evolved in this a little bit. I wanted peacetime after Trump won the first time. I knew it wasn't going to be, but I wanted it, and it just wasn't. And never again will that even cross my mind until we're winning 40 plus states.
I agree. Well, I appreciate it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much, Alex Marlow. Check him out. Check out his podcast, but also always go to Breitbart. That's a trusted place to get your news. We're so happy you came on today.
Thank you, Tudor. And I love to return the favor in the Alex Marlow Show. So just let me know when you want to come by.
That would be great. Awesome. Thank you. And thank you all for joining the Tudor Dixon Podcast. As always, head over to the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can watch it on Rumble or YouTube at Tudor Dixon. And join us next time. Have a blessed day.